The situation in today is very uneven. Some countries have very good security and some countries have very poor security. And countries that we worry about are Russia, the former Soviet states, Pakistan, North Korea, which we know has fissile material, and we don't know what their security situation is very well. So there's a lot of material floating around the world. Most of it is in Russia and the United States. I think we have a fair degree of certainty about the security situation in the United States. We've been working with the Russians to improve theirs. We've been working with Pakistan to improve their security as well. But more material keeps getting produced in South Asia and India and Pakistan and in other parts of the world, and we're falling behind in the challenge. Yeah, I think you can look at it from a global perspective and be overwhelmed by the amount of material which is out there. Or you can start to break it down by country and by region, and I think that that's probably the easiest way to do it. The two biggest supplies of this fissile material, which is used in weapons, is in the United States and Russia. Most of it is in weapons or in the military sector. A good portion of it, however, is in the civil sector, and the security in the civil sector is not as good as it is in the military sector. Secondly, in developed countries like the United States or in Western Europe, there's a lot of radiological material, not necessarily weapons usable. In other words, it won't explode like a nuclear weapon, but if you wrap dynamite around it, it will contaminate large areas of an urban environment, and those radiological sources are everywhere. They're in hospitals, they're in public buildings, they're in industrial uses, there's a lot of them. Once you move out of the big two, the United States and Russia, and start to look at other parts of the world, you look at places like Pakistan, where there's a lot of material, an increasing supply of the material, terrorist activity on a very high degree, and a very unstable government that may or may not survive. And the danger in a place like that is not necessarily that the terrorists would take over the government and gain control of the nuclear arsenal, but that there might be an insider that's sympathetic to their cause and provide them with some of the material. The four-year goal is extremely ambitious. No one has ever tried to achieve the goal in 4 years. What I would say is that we've been trying to get a grip on this situation since the fall of the old Soviet Union, and that was about 17 years ago, and we still haven't completed the job yet in Russia or in the former Soviet states. So the challenge is enormous, and once you use the word all, it's all-encompassing, and so it means vulnerable nuclear material that may be in countries that don't want to cooperate with you. And the essence of the problem that we have is that to solve this problem, you're going to need cooperation. You're going to need the country that possesses the material to work with other countries if they need to make sure it's secure, or they need to do it themselves. It's one or the other. It's their material, they have a sovereign right to it, they produced it. But they also have an obligation to make sure that it doesn't leak and that it doesn't get used for dangerous purposes. And if they can't do it alone, or they think they need help, then I think they have an obligation to seek that help from other countries. The Fissile Material Working Group is a collection of, right now, American experts that were banded together for the purpose of trying to make sure that the President's objective of securing all nuclear material in 4 years was achieved. And the group has met probably since May. This is now September, October. So for about the last 6 months. And during that period, it came up with 5 recommendations with which it presented to the administration. And what it asked them to do was, first of all, to create a broader umbrella under which all of these activities could occur. So we asked them to produce a new blueprint, in essence, called the Global Nuclear Security Initiative. We ask them to work as quickly as possible to reduce the number of locations where this material is stored so that you reduce the number of vulnerabilities that you face. We ask them to go beyond the current policy that they have as it relates to highly enriched uranium in the civil sector and to work to eliminate it. Their goal is to minimize its use because it's used in research reactors to make medical isotopes which are used in hospitals and for cancer treatment and things like that. We ask them to eliminate the use of highly enriched uranium because highly enriched uranium is the #1 terrorist material if you were going to build a nuclear device. Besides radiological, it's the highly enriched uranium, which is used in bombs, is the material that's most accessible to terrorists. And then we ask them to work with the other G8 nations to ensure that their cooperation continued and that they continue to match what it is the United States is spending. And then finally, we ask the United States to spend what's necessary to meet this objective in 4 years. Well, first of all, it's unprecedented. No other president during this modern era of concern about nuclear terrorism has created a summit, called heads of state together to talk about this subject and sought to get them to sign up to specific outcomes. And the real promise of this summit is that those 37 or so countries, when they arrive and before they even come, will make commitments to ensure that their nuclear material is as secure as possible and add more money and add more manpower and add more policy action which will help accomplish that. My fear is that there's a lot of concern and rifts underneath the surface between some of these countries because some may not want to go as far as the United States wants to go. Others are extremely sensitive about being identified as a nuclear risk. And so I think it's going to take a real effort to achieve what it is that the president wants at this summit. I think it is achievable. And more importantly, I think it's important to make sure that it's not a one-shot deal and that after the summit is over, that there's implementation and follow-up for the next 4 years. 1540 is very important because, first of all, it is binding on individual countries to force them to take all the steps that are necessary to secure all of the materials, not just nuclear, but biological and chemical, that could be used for terrorists, could be used for weapons, and to make sure that it's secure, make sure their export controls are in order, make sure that they're making a maximal effort to protect this material. So as a standard, I think it's extremely important. Its implementation, however, has been a little uneven, in part because, especially in the developing world, you do not have the bureaucratic infrastructure and the deep understanding of the issues, even in a non-governmental world, outside of the government, to help the government produce the kinds of rules and regulations and standards which are required. And then secondly, I think there's a need, for some money to be put up to help countries move this, move their implementation in the right direction. The corollary to what the United States is doing bilaterally is the G8 Global Partnership, which is a multilateral initiative. And it's not just the G8 countries. I mean, they have created a thing called the Global Partnership Against the Proliferation of Weapons of Mass Destruction that includes not just contributions from G8 countries, but also contributions from non-G8 countries, mostly from the developed world, and mostly for projects that their particular country is interested, like nuclear submarine dismantlement in Russia from the Nordic states and things like that. But it's important that there be a multilateral corollary to what the United States is doing on a bilateral basis, and the G8 Global Partnership is it, and it should continue. And it produces a significant amount of money every year. Secondly, I think it's important that the United States and Russia find some common cause in order to lead on these issues in regions of the world where the United States may not have as much pull and the Russians do. This is really about the two countries with the biggest amount of this material showing leadership to the rest of the world, not just on reducing their overall nuclear weapon stockpiles, but on ensuring the absolute highest level of security for their nuclear material stockpiles as well.